Big Shaq's daughter picks up a mop, not for cleaning, but for uncovering. Behind the uniform lies a legacy on the line, and beneath the hotel's golden floors, something far more corrupt than dust. The cleaner isn't just watching, she's documenting. And when the day comes, the employees won't just be fired, they'll be exposed. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. There was a hush to the 10th floor of Lucille Heights. Not silence exactly, but a quiet so controlled it felt practiced. The kind of stillness you don't notice unless you're looking for it. The elevator chimed without apology, its doors opening to a wide hallway dressed in soft cream tones and gold fixtures. Not a scuff on the baseboards, not a fingerprint on the brass handles. Everything looked exactly as it should, and that's what bothered her. Elle O'Neill didn't say much when she stepped out. Didn't fix her jacket, didn't fidget with her bag, didn't smile. Her heels tapped lightly against the herringbone floors, a rhythm too crisp for someone just checking in. But she wasn't here to check in. She was here to look beneath things, and the floor, polished to mirror shine, wasn't offering up any secrets just yet. At 26, Elle had the posture of someone who knew exactly who she was, and exactly who people expected her to be. Daughter of Shaquille O'Neal, heiress to Lucille Heights, MBA grad from a New York school that cost more per semester than some folks made in a year. But if people thought that made her soft, they were in for a quiet surprise. Her father, Big Shaq himself, was the heart of the building. Everybody knew it. The guests, the vendors, even the delivery guys with sweat on their backs and checklists in hand. He made time for everyone. Spoke gently, asked questions, and remembered names. He was loved, not just respected. And Elle? She adored him. But admiration didn't mean blindness. She'd return to Atlanta for what was supposed to be a simple few weeks. Shadow some executives, review fiscal reports, and smile politely at events. Instead, she found herself pausing at doors, watching interactions, and sensing something that numbers couldn't explain. It started small. A whisper clipped short when she entered a staff room. A frown on a housekeeper's face that didn't vanish fast enough. Someone pushing past a janitor without acknowledgement. Not out of haste but habit. There were no screaming matches, no obvious hostility, just a quiet erosion of dignity that only sharpened the more she paid attention. The staff floor, officially called operations, was a place most guests never saw. Elle walked it now with slow steps, eyes scanning bulletin boards filled with safety reminders and wellness slogans. She noted how faded some of the posters were. She noticed how certain staff wore fake smiles only around supervisors, and how others, like the younger front desk agents, glanced at her with mild annoyance, unaware of who she was, seeing only a new face that didn't wear a name tag. "Can I help you?" a voice asked, clipped and professional. Elle turned. The woman was tall, well-dressed in the hotel's formal navy uniform. Her badge read Terran, front desk supervisor. "Just observing," Elle replied with a neutral tone. Terran's smile didn't reach her eyes. Guests don't usually walk through staff corridors. "I'm not a guest," Elle answered simply. Terran gave a slow nod and moved on, her heels striking the floor with something close to challenge. Later that day, Elle sat in the manager's office across from her father. Shaq leaned back in his chair, massive hands folded across his stomach, watching her with curiosity. "You've got that face," he said, "like you're about to suggest something I ain't gonna like." Elle cracked a smile. "How often does that happen?" "Often enough," he chuckled. Then, more seriously, "What's on your mind, baby girl?" She hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of care. Her father had built Lucille Heights from scratch after retiring from the game, named it after the woman who raised him, filled it with art, warmth, and principles. It was supposed to be more than a hotel. It was supposed to be a message. "There's a crack in the floor," she said finally. Shaq tilted his head. "We got marble on all 10 levels, expensive stuff. That floor ain't cracked." She met his eyes. Not the marble, the people standing on it. She told him what she'd seen, or rather what she hadn't. Kindness, empathy, basic respect for the invisible workers. She talked about the tone people used behind closed doors, the hierarchy that had crept in without announcement, the way certain employees wielded their roles like little crowns. Shaq listened, didn't interrupt, just rubbed his thumb across his lower lip, like he did when something bothered him deep down. "I built this place so people didn't have to feel small. he murmured finally. Not the guests. Not the staff. Especially not the ones cleaning the floors. I know, Elle said. That's why I think we need to do something. Not top down. Not through HR. Something real. He looked at her then, not just as his daughter, but as a woman shaped by his legacy, now forging her own. What you thinking? She leaned forward. Let me work undercover. As a cleaner. No cameras. No announcement. Just me, a mop, and a chance to see what people are really like when they think no one's looking. He raised an eyebrow. That's not a small ask. You know you'll see things you can't unsee. I'm not afraid of dirt, she said. I'm not talking about dirt, he replied. I'm talking about disappointment. Silence passed between them like a quiet warning, but neither of them looked away. All right, he said at last. But you come to me the second it goes sideways. She nodded. Deal. And so, Elle disappeared, and Lena arrived. Lena wore loose gray coveralls, carried a bucket with worn bristles and cracked handles. Her badge didn't say O'Neill. It said Contract Temp. She entered through the rear lot, clocked in at the service desk, and kept her eyes and ears wide open. The first day, nobody looked twice at her. They passed her like she was part of the wall. Instructions were short, sometimes muttered. Taryn passed her in the hallway, and didn't recognize her, or pretended not to. A young man named Kyle chuckled when she asked where the cleaning supply closet was. Ask Maria, he said, nodding toward an older woman, with weary eyes. She's been here longer than the tile. Maria didn't smile, just handed over a ring of keys, and said, Don't touch the blue towels. They're for guests who matter. Ella understood. She was being tested, but not with intention. This was how the staff treated the invisible. The ones who mopped, swept, emptied bins, wiped down the invisible fingerprints of luxury. That night, in the apartment Shaq kept for her on the top floor, Elle wrote in a leather-bound notebook. One line only. Respect doesn't trickle down. It has to be rooted at the bottom. Downstairs, the marble gleamed. But beneath that sheen, something pulsed. Not blood, not life, but something colder. Indifference. Maybe even cruelty. It was just the beginning. Because the floor was too quiet, and she had only just begun listening. He turned his head, studying her profile. You've got that same look your grandma Lucille used to have when she was about to rearrange the whole church board. Elle smiled, but there was weight behind it. I want to do it, Dad. I'm sure. He shifted, facing her now. Elle, no, don't give me the speech again. I'm not giving a speech, I'm giving you a warning. He took the coffee from her hand, sipped and winced. This tastes like burnt paper. It's black. You like sugar. You always blame the coffee. Don't dodge me, she sighed. I've been watching, Dad. I've been walking your halls, sitting in those break rooms, riding those service elevators. There's something happening under all this shine. And you think going undercover's the way to fix it? I think it's the only way to understand it. Shaq looked away again, jaw tight. People aren't always who they pretend to be, especially when they think nobody's watching. Exactly. That truth can mess you up. I'd rather be messed up than blind. He didn't speak for a while. The air between them thickened, not with anger but concern. Shaq had built Lucille Heights to stand as a testament to his mother's strength, his own rebirth, and the power of creating safe spaces. He had trusted the wrong people once before, in business and friendship, and the scars hadn't fully healed. You're not a kid anymore, he said finally. But you're still my daughter, and what you're asking, it's not just a little experiment. I know. It's going to change things, maybe permanently. Then let it. He handed her the coffee back, then turned and walked toward the stairs. Before disappearing, he tossed over his shoulder. Your name's Lena now. Start Monday. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. Elle stood there a moment longer, the heat of decision rising through her chest. She had gotten her way, but not without weight, and now there was no turning back. Monday came quietly, without ceremony. The Lucille Heights staff entrance was nothing like the grand lobby. It was narrow, gray-walled, with a keypad on the door and flickering overhead lights. She wore the uniform they issued, gray cotton slacks, a loose polo shirt, black slip-resistant shoes. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry. Even the name tag was generic. Lena, contracted housekeeping. Her badge didn't beep. It buzzed. A low mechanical tone that seemed to whisper you don't belong here, even though she did. Purposefully. Inside, the staff locker room smelled of bleach and resignation. A row of metal benches divided the room. Lockers creaked. A few women chatted in Spanish. One laughed too hard at something unfunny. Nobody looked up. Elle found an empty locker and slipped her bag in. No one asked her name. No one offered help. And that was the first lesson. The second came 10 minutes later when she was handed a cart by a shift supervisor named Mason, a tall man in a wrinkled shirt who barely made eye contact. "Start on 8, he said. "Check the schedule. Don't touch guest laundry unless it's in a bag." "What if it's not in a bag?" "Then don't touch it," he snapped, already walking off. She wheeled the cart into the elevator and tried not to overthink the silence that accompanied her. The 8th floor was a long stretch of identical doors and framed abstract art. The hallway lights buzzed softly. The air was cold, and just like that, the real work began. Elle stripped beds, scrubbed bathroom tiles, emptied trash, and refilled lotion bottles. She wiped fingerprints from mirrors and hairspray from sinks. She found gum under a nightstand, a cracked iPhone behind a pillow, and a handwritten note that read, "Don't forget to breathe." Every hour taught her more than a week in the boardroom ever had. Not about the hotel, but about people. Some guests nodded. Most ignored. One woman called out without looking up, "Hey, the light in the closet's out. Can you fix it?" Elle responded softly, "I'll let maintenance know." The woman huffed. "Just do it yourself, you're already in here." She didn't argue. Just made a note. In the break room later, a group of employees sat around a long plastic table. The food smelled like microwaved leftovers. Conversation was low, murmured. Elle slid into a corner seat and listened. "I saw her again today," one woman said, twirling a fork. "Who?" "That front desk girl. Taryn," rolling her eyes like she owns the damn floor. "Oh, her? She don't even say hi to the kitchen staff. She don't say hi to her own reflection." Laughter followed, but not loud. Bitter amusement. The kind that tastes like you've chewed it too long. Taryn. Elle remembered her well. Sharp, composed, the supervisor with a porcelain smile and something darker behind it. Another employee chimed in. "I swear if corporate ever came down here, this whole floor would fall apart." Good thing they never do. Elle didn't speak, but she wrote the words down later that night in her notebook. Good thing they never do. Day by day, Elle became invisible. She learned how to mop in zigzag strokes to avoid streaks, learned which vents rattled when the air kicked in. She saw how Beau, the night janitor with a limp and a soft voice, worked harder than anyone and was still treated like a shadow. She heard things too. Whispers, laughs, moments when people let their guards down just enough to show who they really were. Like when Kyle made a joke about the cleaning girl being slow, even though Elle had outpaced him all week. Or when Taryn walked by and said to another front desk clerk, loud enough to hear, "Can't wait till this new batch of temps cycle out. Don't even bother learning their names." And still, Elle said nothing. But she watched and waited. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the restraint, the moments when she wanted to speak up, to snap back, to remind them whose name was etched in brass outside the hotel. But she didn't, because she wasn't here to punish, not yet. She was here to see the truth. All of it. That Friday, as she folded towels in a service closet that reeked of detergent, Beau appeared beside her. "Your fold's too tight," he said. Elle looked up. "Excuse me?" He smiled gently. "It's supposed to be loose, so it doesn't wrinkle when it cools." She adjusted. "Thanks." Beau leaned against the doorframe. "I've seen you before, you know." Her hands paused. "Where?" "Top floor. 2 weeks back. You were with Shaq." Elle stared at him, unsure whether to deny it or not. Beau shrugged. "Don't worry. I ain't saying nothing. Just figured you were here for a reason. Folks like you don't end up folding towels by accident." She relaxed a little. "You don't miss much, do you?" Beau grinned. "You learn to notice things when nobody notices you." The words sat heavy in the air. Elle nodded, more to herself than to him. The shift ended late. Elle clocked out with sore arms, a full notebook, and more questions than answers. The staff locker room was empty except for her reflection in the scratched mirror. She took off her badge, placed it carefully on the sink, and stared at the name on it. Lena. But behind the name was fire. And this was just the beginning of what she'd come to expose. And this was just the beginning of what she'd come to expose. The hallway lights above her flickered just once, As Elle adjusted her name tag, Lena in bold plastic letters, and pulled the cart behind her for the morning shift. Gray uniform, rubber-soled shoes, disposable gloves in one pocket. Her hair was tucked into a tight bun. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance now, which was the point. In this uniform, she didn't exist. She didn't command attention, didn't draw smiles or greetings. She had become one of them, the ones who walked past unnoticed, whose presence was acknowledged only when something spilled, broke, or needed scrubbing away. The guest elevators were reserved for those who could afford polished shoes and perfume. She used the freight elevator at the far end of the corridor, past the laundry room and beside the water-damaged storage wall no one seemed to care enough to repair. It groaned as it lifted, its metal clanging like a weary confession every time it moved. Her first assignment was a corner suite, on the 7th floor. It wasn't her first time cleaning a room that expensive, but this one was special. The guest was still inside, an early riser. He looked her way once, then waved her in with the air of someone brushing off a fly. Didn't say hello, didn't offer a glance of acknowledgement. She mopped around his breakfast tray, careful not to look at him too long. As she reached for the trash, he casually said, "Careful, that bag has medication in it. Don't go throwing that out like the last one." Elle nodded, even though she hadn't touched anything yet. She stepped out of the room 15 minutes later with his disapproval trailing her like perfume. That was the first of many rooms that day, and it wasn't even 10. By the time she reached the 6th floor, her shoulders had begun to ache. Not from the work, but from the weight of invisibility. It wasn't just being ignored, it was being actively overlooked. Eye contact avoided. Instructions barked like commands to a machine. At lunch she sat alone in the back corner of the staff cafeteria, watching groups form with quiet precision, desk clerks with other clerks, bellhops clustered together, laundry and cleaning divided by language, hierarchy and familiarity. It was then that she first noticed Beau. He wasn't loud, wasn't charismatic. In fact, he hardly moved at all. He sat near the microwave, eating a sandwich wrapped in foil, chewing slowly as he watched the room like a man watching a storm form on the edge of a field. He wore the same gray uniform, but his had a faded patch sewn above the name tag that read U.S. Army, retired. His left leg twitched occasionally, involuntary, and he carried a cane strapped to the side of his utility cart. His hands were strong but moved with the deliberateness of someone who didn't waste a single motion. Didn't speak. Not until the 3rd day. Elle had just finished scrubbing the baseboards in a hallway suite, sweat dotting her collar, when he appeared beside her with a mop of his own. "Too much water," he said, gesturing to her bucket. She looked up. "What?" He nodded toward the floor. "If you leave it that wet, the polish'll strip by next week." Elle glanced down, realizing he was right. She'd been trying to move fast, too fast. The hotel's obsession with perfection didn't account for realistic pace. "Thanks," she muttered. Beau didn't smile, but he didn't walk away either. "You're new." She nodded. "You listen more than you talk." "That's good." That was it. He disappeared into the next hallway like a shadow folded into light. But from that day forward, Beau appeared every now and then. Not as a guide, not even as a friend, but as a quiet presence who noticed what others didn't. Over the next week, Elle began to see things with sharper edges. She saw how Maria, the senior housekeeper, was subtly excluded from meetings. She saw how Taryn avoided saying certain names, and rolled her eyes when the Spanish-speaking staff gathered together. She saw how guests often handed tips to male employees, but barely looked at the women, and she saw how everyone, from supervisors to night shift clerks, talked differently around the invisible ones. Once in the service hallway behind the spa, she overheard a manager say, "I'd trust a guest's complaint before I trust one of the janitors. You know how they exaggerate." Elle stayed still, holding her mop against the wall, absorbing every word. She didn't write it down. She didn't need to. It etched itself into her skin. At night, in her private apartment suite, above the 10th floor, one Beau didn't know existed. She peeled off the uniform like armor. She'd sit by the window, knees pulled to her chest, and try to make sense of the fractures she kept finding beneath the surface of her father's dream. Lucille Heights was built on values: fairness, grace, inclusion, but somewhere along the way, the surface shine had grown too thick. It was all polish and no pulse. Elle had always admired her father's principles, but now she was beginning to see that even principles could be quietly hijacked by complacency. The next day, Beau approached her during a short break outside behind the staff loading dock. He leaned against the wall, watching her stare at the back lot, where trucks unloaded linens and supplies. "You from here?" he asked. Elle shook her head. "Not really. You act like you know the place, but you don't look like you've been around long." She hesitated. "I used to visit." Boo looked at her for a beat too long, then nodded slowly. "That's so." Silence stretched between them. Elle shifted her weight. She wasn't sure if Bo was testing her, or just being himself, the kind of man who needed silence to read people. "I was in the army," he said suddenly. "Long time ago. Got hurt overseas. They told me I'd never walk again. But I did." She glanced at his cane. He saw her look. "Doesn't mean I walk well. But I show up. I can see that." "You don't flinch," he said. "Most folks flinch when they hear about injuries. Or they overcompensate. You didn't." Elle shrugged. "Doesn't seem like something to flinch over." He smirked. Just a flicker, then tapped his cane twice against the concrete. "This place used to be different. Back when Shaq was downstairs more often. Folks had manners. Managers respected the janitors. Guests said thank you." "You remember thank yous?" "Yeah," Elle said quietly. "I do." Bo looked at her again, this time more pointedly. "You got something in your eyes, like you're watching more than cleaning." She froze. Her first instinct was to deny, but something about Bo made her pause. "I'm trying to understand the gaps," she said. "The ones between how things look and how they really are." Bo didn't press, just said, "That's dangerous work. Seeing through people." She met his gaze. "You do it every day." He chuckled softly. "I'm old. I got nothing to lose. You still got softness on your face." Elle wasn't sure if that was an insult or a warning, but she felt it like someone drawing the curtain back an inch. "Careful, Lena," Bo added. "This building got stories. Some people tell 'em loud. Others hide 'em deep. You keep digging, you'll find things you didn't ask for." That night, Elle dreamed of elevators that didn't open, voices behind doors, a mop that wouldn't rinse clean. She woke up unsettled, breath catching in her throat. Something Bo said clung to her mind. This place used to be different. Maybe her father hadn't just lost control. Maybe he'd been blinded by faith in the wrong people. And maybe, just maybe, there were people like Bo, the quiet ones, the watchful ones, who held the truth like keys in their pockets. The next morning, she found a folded note in her locker. No name, just one sentence scrawled in blue ink. "If you want to know where the real dirt is, don't look under the beds, look under the books." She turned the note over. Blank. No clue who left it. But the message was clear. Not everyone in Lucille Heights was asleep. And the uniform wasn't hiding her nearly as well as she thought. "I saw her 2 weeks ago," another voice joined in. Male, slightly younger. Maybe Rico from Bellstaff. "She was standing with Shaq out by the lobby waterfall talking like she owns air." Taryn snorted. "She does. In her head. What I can't stand is the way they act like they're doing us a favor by being here. Like, we should bow, because their family made money, and threw us scraps. Newsflash. I've been here 6 years. I run this floor." Elle clenched the mop handle tighter. The grooves in the plastic dug into her palms. She should have left, walked away, but she couldn't. Her legs wouldn't move. Her ears, though, took in every syllable like a bruise. "You notice how nobody ever checks on the night crew anymore?" Taryn added. "It's because no one upstairs cares. They care about press, about image. People like them." Her voice dropped lower, but not gentler. "They don't see the difference between help and staff. They don't even know the names of the people who make their little empire run." Elle stepped back slightly, the cartwheel squeaking as it nudged the storage bin. She froze, heart thudding. A pause hung in the air outside the lounge. Then, nothing. Conversation resumed. "Yeah," said Rico again. "But Shaq's chill. It's the daughter who's got that look like she's calculating everything." "Exactly," Taryn replied. "That's how they get you. All smiles in public. But if you forget to greet them in the hallway, you are off the schedule next week." Another laugh. Then chairs scooting, bags rustling, break time ending. Elle exhaled only when the lounge door swung open, and the hallway began to repopulate. She ducked back into the linen room, her chest burning with something deeper than embarrassment. It was betrayal, not because they didn't know who she was, but because of what they assumed about her family, about the people they smiled at in morning meetings and thanked at fundraisers. Her father had always said, "You want to know who people are? Don't watch how they treat me. Watch how they treat the ones they think don't matter." Now she understood what he meant. That evening she returned to her suite and opened the leather-bound journal she kept hidden behind the false back panel of her bathroom cabinet. She flipped past pages filled with observations and bullet point timelines and began a new section titled Unfiltered Truths. She wrote down every quote she remembered from that conversation. Not because she wanted to get back at Taryn or Rico, not because she intended to confront them, but because something needed to be documented. The rot wasn't just an oversight, it was an attitude, an entitlement, in a culture that tolerated disrespect because it was dressed in professional smiles. The next few days, Elle became more deliberate. She didn't just clean, she listened. She timed her movements to breaks. She lingered near vending machines when small groups formed. She picked up fragments, nothing earth-shattering but revealing nonetheless. Like the way Taryn referred to Beau as that slow vet when she thought he wasn't within earshot. Or how a guest complained about housekeeping not folding towels into swans, and instead of addressing it properly, a supervisor docked Maria's shift without explanation. There was a cruelty not born from overt aggression, but from practiced neglect. One afternoon, Beau found her in the stairwell between the third and fourth floors, pretending to fix a storage latch but really just catching her breath. "You look like someone who's been holding smoke in her lungs too long," he said. Elle looked up, startled. "You always sneak up like that." "I move slow, not quiet." She gave a tight smile. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're listening too hard. That kind of listening drains you." She hesitated, then nodded. "It's different when the words are about your own family." Beau raised an eyebrow. "They find out?" "No, that's the worst part. They said it all because they didn't care who was listening. Because they think we don't matter." Beau leaned against the rail, tapping his cane softly. "People say the truth sets you free, but they forget it breaks you first." Elle didn't speak. "Whatever you're looking for, Lena," he continued, "just be careful you don't drown in it. The cracks in this place go deep, and some folks would rather bury truth than face it." "Then maybe they shouldn't be here," she said, sharper than she intended. Beau studied her quietly. "And maybe you need to decide, are you here to clean the floors, or to tear up the foundation?" That question stayed with her. That night, Elle pulled up employee files on her secure laptop using her executive credentials, discreetly. She reviewed Taryn's records. 6 years, several glowing performance reviews, rapid promotions, but between the lines were gaps. Exit interviews from employees under her supervision, with notes marked toxic culture, verbal intimidation, and unaddressed complaints. She compiled them, cross-checked timelines, matched names from the complaints to her own interactions over the last 2 weeks. Patterns began to emerge, not isolated incidents. A quiet system of internal gatekeeping, manipulation through scheduling power, gossip used as weaponized control. It was strategic, not accidental. Elle wasn't just uncovering behavior, she was tracing a pattern of influence, one that shaped which employees got promoted, who felt heard, and who quietly left. Days later, while cleaning a penthouse suite, she found a handwritten card on the floor beside a tipped-over wastebasket. It had fallen beneath the couch, unnoticed. The envelope read, "To Mr. O'Neill. Thank you for saving my sister's life." Inside was a note from someone named Neva, one of the front desk night agents. It detailed how Shaq had personally helped her sister get into a recovery center, after a guest's assault accusation nearly ruined her. The accusation had turned out to be false, but no one else had intervened, only Shaq. Elle stared at the card for a long time, then returned it to the desk where it belonged, face up. The act reminded her why she was here, why her father mattered, why the name O'Neill deserved to mean something beyond luxury. And yet, while he had been saving people one at a time, others had been quietly undoing that good, beneath him. By the end of the week, Elle had 4 full journal pages of direct quotes, dozens of footnotes, a map, literal and emotional, of where Lucille Heights had lost its way. But she still didn't know who else knew, who else had seen, who had looked the other way. One thing, however, had become very clear. Taryn wasn't just bitter. She was building influence, undermining certain staff while elevating those who echoed her sentiments. She was drawing lines, subtle but firm, between the us who made the hotel run and the them who just signed checks. And no one had called her on it. Elle knew it would be dangerous to confront her now. Not because she feared Taryn, but because timing mattered. This wasn't just about power. It was about proof. about gathering enough truth to show her father what had been hidden in plain sight. But beneath the anger, something else festered. Heartbreak. Because this was supposed to be a place where kindness led, where legacy meant more than money, where her father's heart wasn't just a symbol but a standard. Now that standard was fractured, and the only way to restore it was to face the whisperers with something louder. Truth. It was nearly midnight when the final suite on the 6th floor was cleared and logged. Most of the day staff had already gone home, leaving behind a thinner, quieter version of the hotel. The glossy lobbies now echoed faintly, as if exhaling the last of the day's tension. Lights dimmed just enough to let the night staff work in semi-darkness, like ghosts in a mansion that had forgotten its own opulence. Ella moved slowly, the cart nearly empty, her body aching, not from labor alone, but from the layers of truth she'd absorbed. Her notebook was heavier than ever, figuratively and literally. But tonight, something was different. The air held a certain charge, like the moment before a summer storm, where you can feel the weight of something about to crack open. Bull was waiting near the freight elevator. He wasn't leaning on his cane this time. He stood upright, arms folded, his expression unreadable. "You always hang out by the elevator?" Elle asked, her voice low, casual. Bo tilted his head slightly. "Only when I've got something to say and I don't want a hallway full of ears." Elle paused, then stepped closer, gripping the handle of her cart. "All right, what is it?" He looked at her for a long moment, before speaking. "You dropped your wallet 2 nights ago, behind the water closet on 4. I didn't open it, but it opened itself when it hit the floor." Her pulse stuttered. "And I saw the photo." He waited. "Shaq, holding you on his shoulders. Looks like you were about 9. Elle's breath caught for a second, but she didn't look away. "You gonna say something?" Bo shook his head. Already didn't. A long silence hung between them, one made heavier by the gravity of secrets now acknowledged, but not weaponized. "I'm not here to expose the staff," Elle said. "Not like that." "No," Bo said. "You're here because something's wrong, and you're trying to figure out if it's rotten at the roots, or just the fruit." His words landed with eerie precision. She said nothing, only nodded once. Bo leaned in slightly. "You've got good instincts. You've seen the surface. The gossip, the division, the way the power's been reshaped into little empires by people who think they're owed something. But that's not the whole story." "There's more?" she asked, brow furrowing. "There's always more," he replied. "You've been looking at the employee board too long, but you haven't looked at the names that aren't on it." Her spine straightened. "Go on." Bo checked the hallway quickly, then turned his attention back to her. "There's a man. Wesley. He doesn't clock in. He doesn't wear a badge. You won't find him in payroll. But he's around. A lot. Especially in the lower floors." Elle's mind reeled. "Is he a guest?" Bo snorted. "He's no guest, but he uses the guest entrance. Dressed like a businessman, walks like he owns the place, but no one ever questions him." "Then what is he?" Bo's face darkened, just slightly. "He's what you get when power gets lazy. When trust becomes a blindfold." Her thoughts raced back. She had seen someone matching that description. A tall man in a slate-colored suit, talking with a few managers outside the utility corridor. She remembered the way they deferred to him, laughing at his jokes like it was required. "You're telling me this Wesley isn't on record?" "Not anywhere that matters." "Then why hasn't anyone said anything?" Bo looked at her long and hard. "Because he doesn't just walk the halls. He whispers into ears that make decisions. He shows up to contractor meetings, private development talks, and apparently has influence over which vendors we renew, even which staff stay." "Wait, are you saying he's behind some of the firings?" "I'm saying some of the people you've been writing notes about. They answer to him more than to your father." Elle's stomach twisted. Her father had always been the backbone of this place. But if someone like Wesley had crept in under the radar, steering the ship behind closed doors, then the cracks she'd been seeing weren't the beginning. They were the aftershocks of something deeper. "You're not just cleaning floors, Lena," Bo said, voice low. "You're standing on a trap door. And if you step wrong, someone's gonna try and shut it before you get a look underneath." A part of her wanted to dismiss it, call it paranoia, but too much already lined up. The inconsistencies in authority, the strange shifts in how certain decisions were made. And now, Wesley. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because I think you actually give a damn. Not just about your father's name, or this place, but about what happens to people when names and places fail them." Elle felt that in her chest. Bo stepped back toward the elevator. But if you're going to keep digging, you better start thinking like them. Stay invisible. Listen smarter. And whatever you do, don't confront Wesley unless you've got every last thread in your hand. That man plays chess. You show up with checkers, he'll bury you before the first move. The elevator opened with a slow metallic groan. Bo stepped in, but not before pausing to add, "And if you need help, real help, don't go to anyone in uniform. Go to Marcus in records. He keeps copies of everything, even things he's told to delete." Elle blinked. "Marcus? From the basement?" "Yep." Bo nodded. "Quiet guy. Bit of a hoarder. But he don't trust digital files. Still uses printouts. Locked drawers." The doors began to slide shut. "And Lena," he added. She looked up. "You're not just here to clean. You're here to reclaim something." Then the doors closed. Elle stood in the now silent hallway, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above. She looked down at her gloves, her cart, the fake name tag. None of it felt like a disguise anymore. It felt like a uniform for war. The kind fought in whispers, observations, and restraint. Wesley. A ghost on paper, but clearly breathing within the bones of Lucille Heights. The real question now wasn't just how far his reach extended, it was how close he'd gotten to her father. And whether Shaq had unknowingly built a sanctuary with a serpent in the rafters. That night, Elle sat at her desk, flipping back through every page of her journal. She didn't rewrite anything. She didn't cross anything out. Instead, she added a new title at the top of a fresh page. "Names not on the roster." She underlined Wesley's name twice, then picked up her phone, hesitated, and put it down again. This wasn't the time to tell her father. Not yet. She needed more. And now, thanks to Bo, she knew exactly where to look. Today she had one. Borrowed, not stolen. Mason had left it on his cart during a delivery to the top-floor spa suite. Elle took it with gloved fingers and slipped it into her pocket with practiced calm. No one saw, no one questioned. She waited until her assigned shift ended, until the staff lounge emptied, until the lobby was quieter than usual. Then she slipped into the elevator that no guests ever used, inserted the key, and pressed the black button marked 1. No light flashed. The button didn't even glow, but the doors closed and the car began to hum its descent. The ride down felt longer than it should have. A slow crawl like the hotel itself hesitated to reveal what lived beneath it. When the doors opened, the light inside flickered. Elle stepped into a narrow hallway. It smelled of rust, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The walls were concrete, unpainted, and lined with old piping that ran like veins along the ceiling. This place wasn't on any tour. No concierge mentioned it. No guest brochure ever acknowledged its existence. She moved quietly, passing a boiler room door, stacks of broken-down furniture, and crates marked with inventory codes, but no dates. The hum of the hotel's living systems grew louder. Air compressors, water tanks, electrical boxes. But then she heard something that didn't belong in any of those categories. Voices. Low. Urgent. She followed the sound down a tight corridor to a door that had no name, no number, no sign, just a worn handle and a keypad left unlocked. Inside it was dim. Half the ceiling lights were out. Exposed wires drooped near a broken smoke detector. The room was wide and flat, an old conference or storage area now converted into something far less official. Along one wall were metal bunks, thin mattresses folded up, old blankets neatly stacked. Along another wall stood a row of industrial sewing machines, only 2 of them functioning, both occupied by young women who didn't look up when Elle entered. There were 6 people inside, 3 sewing, 1 stacking boxes, 2 repairing torn staff uniforms with small sewing kits, hunched over in silence. They weren't wearing name tags. Their clothing didn't match any department, and none of them were listed on the hotel's records. Elle knew. She'd memorized them. One of the women, a girl really, no older than 20, looked up and locked eyes with Elle. Her hands didn't stop moving, but her gaze stayed fixed. Elle didn't speak. She didn't need to. She moved slowly, glancing around, noting details. The fans were old and caked with dust. A single hot plate rested on a crate with a rusted pot. Nearby, a mini fridge hummed weakly, stocked with water bottles, and a few pieces of fruit. Printed schedule was pinned to the wall. Not typed, not logged, just names. First names only, most crossed out. This wasn't just unauthorized. It was off books. and it was functioning in the shadows of a place that claimed dignity and transparency. As Elle turned, the same girl from earlier stood and walked to her. She was small, thin, and barefoot, with sleeves rolled past her elbows and a scar visible near her wrist. She held something out in her hand, a baby sock. It was faded pink, torn at the cuff, the kind you'd expect to find in a donation bin. She said nothing, just placed it into Elle's hand, closed her fingers around it, then stepped back and returned to her station. Elle stood frozen. The sock felt weightless, but carried a gravity that crushed her chest. The girl hadn't spoken, but the message was loud enough.
There was a child somewhere.
Or had been. Elle looked back at the girl, who was already sewing again like the moment had never happened. But her eyes flicked up, just once, with a sadness so sharp, it nearly cut through the fluorescent dim. Elle backed out of the room, heart pounding, the sock clenched tight in her hand. She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or march straight to the top floor and demand answers. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't just mismanagement. It wasn't a hostile work environment. It was exploitation. Possibly worse. Possibly trafficking. And someone powerful was keeping it hidden. She returned the way she came, moving fast but silent. At the elevator, she hit the emergency stop before stepping out, then walked the rest of the service corridor on foot. She didn't want any digital record of her access. She couldn't trust the system, not when the system allowed it. In the stairwell between floors, she finally stopped, her breath ragged, her fists shaking. She opened her hand and stared at the sock. It was small, worn, not a prop, not left by accident. It was a message, a plea. Upstairs, guests were drinking cucumber water and scheduling facials. Down here, people were being kept off paper, in rooms without windows, without name. That night, Elle confronted the one person who had always answered her questions honestly. Bo was in the boiler hall, tuning the pressure valves. When she approached, he looked up slowly. "You found it," he said quietly. "Not a question." "You knew," she whispered. "I warned you," he replied. "Told you not everything was on the surface." "How long has this been happening?" Bo exhaled through his nose. "A while. Longer than I've been working here. Maybe. But it got worse about 2 years ago. After a few vendors were replaced. After consultants started making decisions about supply chains and labor hours." "Wesley?" Bo nodded. "He never steps foot down there. But he's the reason that place still runs. He convinced corporate to offload certain nuisance tasks to private handlers. Said it was cost-cutting. And no one questioned it. They questioned. But the ones who pushed got reassigned. Or dismissed quietly." Elle shook her head. "Why didn't you tell my father? I don't have access. Don't have a badge that gets me near the decision makers. And I'm not naive enough to think someone like me with my past, my limp, would be believed if I accused a man in a $1,000 suit of trafficking." "He'd believe you," she said, voice tight. Bull looked at her hard. "Would he? Before you came down here, before you put on this uniform, would you have believed it?" The silence answered for her. Elle gripped the sock again. "I need proof," she said. Bo nodded once. "Then start with the ledgers. Storage 2B. Left side, hidden behind the towel crates. Paper records, vendor deliveries, shift notes, and payroll mismatches. If it's all still there, you'll find what you need." Elle didn't say thank you. There wasn't time. As she walked away, Bo called after her. "And Lena." She paused. He pointed to her hand. "That sock? Don't just keep it as a reminder. Use it. Let it burn into your memory. Because that's not just evidence. That's someone's story waiting to be rescued." She looked at it one last time before tucking it safely into her pocket. Something darker was hiding beneath the golden floor. And now that she'd seen it, there was no turning back. The weight of truth doesn't land all at once. It settles slowly, like dust, until you realize everything around you is coated in it. That's how Elle felt the night she stood outside her father's private study. Sock in pocket, flash drive gripped in one hand, her other trembling against the seam of her slacks. She had rehearsed the conversation in her head at least a dozen times, rewritten every line, imagined every reaction. But now, as she raised her knuckles to the door, everything vanished. Only one thought remained. This is going to change him. Inside, Shaq sat beneath a low-hung chandelier of reclaimed glass, elbows resting on a table worn smooth by decades of hard conversations. He was dressed in a simple gray tracksuit, reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose, a binder of new vendor contracts open in front of him. The same binder Elle had seen on Wesley's desk just days before. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said without looking up. "I saw something worse," she replied, stepping in, shutting the door behind her. Shaq raised his head slowly, removing his glasses. "You ready to talk?" "I'm ready to show you," she said. She plugged the flash drive into the sleek hotel-issued laptop on the edge of his desk and opened the folder marked Lena Logs. First came the audio clips from the staff lounge, break room jabs, and whispered toxicity. Then the photos, time-stamped images of the hidden basement room, faces blurred for safety, conditions impossible to defend. Finally, the ledgers, payroll mismatches, vendor inconsistencies, paper trails from off-books orders routed through a fake subsidiary. The name Wesley L. Hartman appeared on multiple contractor invoices, not as a consultant, but as the billing contact. Shaq didn't speak for a long time. His hands slowly came together, fingers laced, as if trying to hold himself together. His shoulders stiffened, eyes locked to the screen. "I wanted to believe I was building something sacred," he finally said. "Something Mama would be proud of." "You did," Elle replied, gently. "But someone's been gutting it from the inside." Shaq leaned back, exhaling like someone had kicked the air out of him. He rubbed his face with both hands, eyes squeezed shut. "I trusted that man. Wesley. He said he wanted to streamline back-end operations. Said I could focus on people while he handled logistics. He handled people like cargo," Elle said, voice tight. Shaq opened his eyes. They looked tired, not old, but deeply disappointed. "I should have known," he muttered. "It's always the ones who talk smoothest." "You're not to blame," she offered. "They used your name, not your values. That doesn't change what happened under it." Elle said nothing. There was no comfort to offer that would land right. All she could do was let the truth keep breathing between them. "Who else knows?" he asked.
Well,
"A guy in records named Marcus. He's got backups of all the files. The girls down there, the undocumented workers, they're scared. Most won't speak up unless someone comes forward first." Shaq stood, slowly, like the truth had added weight to his every joint. "I need to fire him," he said. "Immediately." Elle hesitated. "Not yet." Shaq looked at her, surprised. "You want to wait?" "I want to test everyone. The staff, the leadership. I want to see how they react without knowing they're being watched. The real them. You do it all at once, and they'll play clean. Give them a day or two. Make them think they've gotten away with it, and the truth will spill." He studied her, proud and pained all at once. "You get that from your mother," he said quietly. "That patience, that fire." She allowed herself a small smile. "You're the one who told me never to confront people until you've already seen how far they'll run." He nodded slowly. "All right, but we control the timeline. We keep this close." She nodded. "No one else." "Not yet." Shaq turned toward the windows. The city lights glittered beneath them, unaware of the quiet war being waged inside one of its proudest establishments. "I built this place because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked," he said, "as a kid, as a player, as a black man with more heart than clout. And I told myself, if I ever had the chance to create something of my own, I'd make sure everyone inside it felt seen." "They will," Elle said, stepping beside him. "We just have to clear the shadows." He turned to her. "How do you want to play it?" "Give me one more day in uniform," she said. "Let them see me as Lena one last time. I'll provoke the truth out of them. Then we confront them, with everything." Shaq nodded. "What about Wesley?" "We track him, see who he talks to, follow the paper trail, then drop it all at once." Shaq exhaled again, this time with a different kind of weight. Resolve. "I should have looked deeper," he said. "You trusted," Elle replied. "That's not your flaw, that's your strength." They sat in silence after that, father and daughter side by side, both staring into a storm only they could feel. Later that night, as Elle returned to her suite, she passed a hallway mirror and caught her reflection. Something had shifted. She wasn't Lena anymore. But she wasn't just Elle either. She was something in between. Someone who had walked the underbelly of power and chosen not to look away. And tomorrow she would go back in. One final time, not as a spy, but as a witness. The reckoning was coming. And this time, it would wear no name tag. "You heard me." Before Taryn could reply, the hallway behind them quieted. The silence fell unnatural. A vacuum created by the sudden presence of someone important. Wesley Hartman had entered the floor. He didn't wear a name badge. Didn't need to. The way the supervisors straightened, the way the housekeepers scattered, it told Elle everything. He walked with calm authority, tailored blazer pressed, hair immaculate, his cologne subtle but commanding. He glanced briefly at Elle, not recognizing her in uniform, just another nameless cleaner in his world. He walked toward the maintenance corridor with Mason trailing behind him, carrying a manila envelope in hand. Elle watched the exchange closely. She knew what this was. "You done here?" Taryn asked with mock sweetness, snapping her fingers toward Elle. But Elle didn't answer. She was already following the sound of Wesley's footsteps, slipping down the hallway at a distance, making sure the service cameras didn't catch her face. She took a side corridor, using a shortcut Bo had once pointed out, a small access path between the storage pantry and electrical control. She reached the corner just in time to hear low voices. Wesley was speaking, not with the usual arrogance, but with quickened urgency. "Numbers won't match this week." "You sure they won't audit?" "They never do," Mason replied. "As long as the vendor codes match and the tip-outs stay quiet." Wesley opened the envelope and thumbed through a stack of cash. Fresh, crisp, untraceable. "Keep this flowing," he said. "We're almost clear of the probation window. After that we lock the second floor for renovation and move product through the facade units." Elle's breath caught. Product. That was the word. Not linens. Not supplies. Not services. But product. Wesley turned toward the shadowed edge of the hallway. She ducked back just in time. He paused, sensing something, but then moved forward with Mason. Elle slipped away before either of them doubled back. Her mind raced. This wasn't just corruption anymore. This was something far more deliberate, structured, criminal. The mention of facade units matched something Marcus had flagged in the ledgers. Newly approved transit closet space, tagged to third-party renovation partners that didn't exist. She rounded a corner back toward the main staff hallway, and nearly collided with Bo. He saw her expression and instantly knew. "You saw something." "I saw everything," she said. "He's moving cash through supply contractors, and he's planning to use the renovations to smuggle something, or someone." Bo's eyes narrowed. "You sure?" He called it product. "That's not fabric. That's not soap." Bo clenched his jaw. "Then it's worse than we thought." A soft chime rang through the speaker system. A call for a scheduled executive tour to begin in the lobby. Elle checked her watch. Right on time, which meant Wesley and his entourage would be occupied for the next hour, showing off upcoming investments to board members. Bo leaned in. "You need to go now. Marcus is on duty. He'll give you the full logs. Everything we need to lock this down." Elle nodded. "What about you?" "I'll stall the staff. Create a delay on the 9th floor. That'll buy you time." They split in opposite directions. Elle made her way down to the records room, heart racing. She bypassed the main hallway and entered through the back server route. Marcus was already there, stacking archived invoices into a coded drawer system that hadn't seen sunlight in years. "You were right," she said. Marcus turned, startled. "Wesley?" "And Mason." He didn't ask for proof, just handed her a folder thick with cross-referenced printouts. Delivery schedules that didn't match exit logs. Workers signed off who never existed. Units of supply marked disposed that never entered inventory. She tucked it all into a messenger bag and thanked him quietly. "Be careful," Marcus warned. "That guy's not just a crook, he's connected." As Elle left the records room and headed back upstairs, her thoughts turned to Wesley. His voice, his posture. Something had struck her earlier, a tick in his speech, a phrase that echoed from somewhere in her past.
Then it hit her.
Years ago, her father had told her about a friend-turned-enemy, a former associate who'd tried to take over one of his first gyms during expansion. A man with charm, business acumen, and a snake's sense for timing. He'd been shut out, but not publicly, quietly, legally. His name had been Wesley L. Hartman, and now, he was back. This wasn't a con. This was a vendetta. She emerged onto the floor again, just as the tour was finishing. Wesley stood at the head of the group, smiling, gesturing to the refurbished suites like they were promises. Shaq was not among them, per plan. He was watching from above, waiting for Elle's word. Their eyes met for the first time. Wesley paused. He recognized her, not as Lena, as Elle. His smile froze for a fraction too long. And that's when she knew he knew. But it was too late. Because tomorrow, she'd show the world exactly who he was. and she wouldn't be doing it in uniform. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. You just couldn't hear it yet. Not from the penthouse boardroom where Shaq stood in a pressed charcoal suit, his expression unreadable, watching the sunrise bleed into the Atlanta skyline. It was the kind of morning meant for clean slates and quiet clarity, but today nothing was clean, and clarity came with a cost. Behind him, Elle stood by the table, the thick evidence folder open in front of her, every page a nail in a coffin. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but her hands were steady. This wasn't adrenaline anymore. This was something colder, something He's not a consultant, Elle said. He's a ghost you buried, and now he's wearing your skin. Shaq didn't turn immediately. He stared out the window, jaw set like granite. Wesley Hartman, he finally said, voice low, measured. You know I had to sue that man. I know, but he didn't disappear like you thought. Shaq turned slowly, eyes meeting hers. Tell me. Elle took a breath and laid it all out. Chronologically, fact by fact. A forensic trail of greed, hidden beneath years of polished hotel operations. The shell corporations, the vendor names linked to non-existent addresses, the emergency renovation orders that siphoned money directly to Hartman-owned subsidiaries, and the newest layer, undocumented workers pushed through low-level maintenance channels, not just to avoid taxes, but to disappear them entirely from the system. He's been embedding himself into Lucille Heights slowly, Elle explained, flipping through ledgers. He started small, a single custodial subcontractor, then a renovation vendor, then logistics coordination. He never put his name on anything directly tied to HR or payroll, just infrastructure. Shaq lowered himself into a leather chair, spine heavy with realization. And all of this happened under my name. Not your name, she said. Your reputation. He looked up. That's what made it easy. You were the shield. No one questioned invoices with your signature on the masthead. No one questioned backdoor decisions, because they all believed you were watching. Shaq rubbed his face slowly, as if trying to scrub the betrayal off his skin. I kept this place open during a pandemic, he said, more to himself than her. I paid people out of pocket when occupancy dropped. And this whole time, he was skimming it. Elle finished. He waited until your attention shifted to charity boards and expansion projects. He used the space you gave to good people and filled it with shadows. Shaq's silence was a different kind of loud. Then, after a moment, he asked the question that had clearly been clawing at him. How did no one else see it? They did, Elle replied. Some of them, but they were either too scared to speak up or too loyal to question what they thought was your will. Shaq's face darkened. So their silence became my sin. She didn't argue. Some truths didn't need softening. Shaq leaned back, eyes closed, as memories replayed behind his lids. Wesley was slick even back then, talked smooth, dressed better than he could afford. He had ideas, big ones, but no patience, tried to accelerate a franchise deal behind my back, used company funds to buy out a competitor, then lied about it. I fired him before he could turn my name into another scandal. And now he's doing exactly that. Quietly. Strategically. Shaq sat forward, resting his arms on the table. How much do you think he's taken? Elle flipped the last page, a detailed estimate. Between falsified repairs, inflated consulting fees, and ghost employees, over 3.1 million. Shaq whistled low. He's not just stealing. He's staging a collapse. Exactly. He's not just robbing you. He's setting it up so when the truth comes out, you take the fall for negligence, fraud, or worse. Public perception won't ask how. They'll just ask why Big Shaq let it happen under his nose. The words hung there like smoke. Heavy. Inevitable. Shaq stood again, walked to the minibar, poured himself a glass of water, and drank it like it tasted sour. I let this happen, he said. I believed my name was enough to protect people, but a name doesn't watch payroll. A name doesn't walk basement corridors. You did that. You taught me to, Elle said gently. To lead by walking the floors, not just signing off on them. Shaq turned back to her, the weariness in his face now mixed with something else. Resolve. So what's the plan? Elle pulled a second folder from her bag. We've got video, audio, ledgers, testimonies. But if we want this to land right, we need to control the reveal. Not just expose Wesley, dismantle the web. She laid out the three-phase strategy. Phase 1, isolation. Elle had already arranged for internal systems access to be quietly revoked from any employee linked to Wesley's operations. That included Mason, 2 junior managers, and a contracted third-party scheduler. No terminations yet, just locks changing silently, email access disabled, digital footprints contained. Phase 2. Confrontation. Scheduled for tomorrow in the main atrium. Elle and Shaq would host a mandatory staff appreciation meeting. Public enough for pressure. Controlled enough for containment, with legal counsel waiting in the wings. Phase 3 redemption. Once the dust settled, the hotel would launch a public initiative, transparent hiring audits, anonymous reporting channels, and a support program for any undocumented worker found to be exploited under Wesley's pipeline. No cover-ups, full accountability. Shaq listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. And what about him? Wesley? Elle asked. Yeah. What happens to him? Elle met her father's eyes. We don't fire him. Shaq blinked. Excuse me? Not first. Not loud. Not the way he expects. We let him watch the walls close in. Quiet locks. Empty offices. Names erased. We let him stand there and realize the entire game was played in his shadow, by the girl he thought was just the cleaning help. A slow smile crept onto Shaq's face. Not cruel, but justified. You O'Neills don't fight with fists, he said. You fight with facts and fire. And we don't lose. Shaq clapped his hands together once. All right then, let's shut him down. Elle nodded, feeling the first breath of relief in weeks. But as she turned to pack the folders, Shaq spoke again, softer this time. Elle? Yeah. He paused. Thank you. For not letting my dream become someone else's weapon. She met his gaze. It's still your dream. I just pulled back the curtain. And with that, the plan was set. By this time tomorrow, Wesley Hartman would no longer be a shadow in Lucille Heights. He would be a name, erased. For the last several weeks, she said clearly, I've been working under the name Lena, as a contracted cleaner in this hotel. Whispers shot through the room like electricity. Taryn shifted. Her lips curled upward into a slow, mocking smile. Oh, this is cute. Elle didn't react. I mopped floors. She continued. Scrubbed tiles. Took orders. Listened. I heard what was said when people thought they were talking to someone who didn't matter. She reached into her leather bag and pulled out a stack of folders, color-coded and labeled. Shaq took one from her and opened it. We have records. Payroll mismatches. Off-book labor. Falsified vendor reports. False maintenance logs. The room grew tense. No one spoke now. Elle opened a second folder. We also have voice recordings. Conversations mocking staff. Intimidating them. Gossip that crossed into manipulation. We're not here for revenge. We're here for accountability. Now she turned to Taryn, who had gone oddly still. Taryn, Shaq said softly. You once said in a break room that people like me didn't understand the work because we signed checks instead of scrubbing grout. Someone inhaled sharply. A few heads turned. You also said, and I quote, these rich types always pretend to care until the PR cameras turn off. Taryn rose slowly from her seat, arms stiff at her sides. You've been spying on us? No, Elle replied. I've been watching. Observing. Documenting the culture you helped create. Shaq stepped in, voice still level. Taryn, he said, you're not being dismissed for what you said to my daughter. You're being dismissed because of what you said to people you thought were beneath you. Taryn scoffed, but her voice cracked. You can't fire me for not being nice. No, Shaq replied, but I can fire you for leading a toxic staff culture covering for falsified overtime claims and undermining peer evaluations for personal gain. The color drained from her face. You used your position to belittle, not build. You created fear, not structure. That's not leadership. That's sabotage. Shaq's voice never rose, but each word landed like thunder. Controlled. Fine. Elle stepped forward, handing a sealed envelope to a nearby security lead. In that envelope are formal dismissal notices for 7 individuals, including you, Mason. Mason, seated near the back, stood as if to object, but a second glance at Elle's expression made him sit down again, quietly. You manipulated inventory, she said. You redirected contracted laborers into unauthorized floors. You accepted cash payments for approvals you didn't have authority to give. Bo shifted in his seat, watching Mason closely. And as for Mr. Wesley Hartman, Elle continued, addressing the room now, he is not and has never officially been a consultant with Lucille Heights. He is a disbarred former associate who manipulated our internal systems to orchestrate a personal siphoning scheme, including what we believe is potential human exploitation. Gasps broke through the room. Law enforcement has been contacted. Auditors are on standby. And by end of day, every contract and ledger he touched will be reevaluated for legal action. The silence that followed was different now. Not stunned, but sobered. Shaq stepped forward again. This hotel stands for something. Not for luxury, not for legacy, but for people. That's all it's ever been. And if anyone can't uphold that, whether you sweep lobbies or sign invoices, this isn't your home. He paused. Some of you might be wondering if this is personal. It is. It always has been. Because every person who walks through these doors deserves to be seen. The stillness that followed held its own kind of justice. Elle glanced at Beau, who gave her the smallest of nods. Shaq turned to the front row. Now, one more thing. He called Beau by name. I've been told, he said, that there's a man who's shown up every day, walked with a limp, worked without complaint, watched without judgment. And when he finally spoke, he saved this place. Beau looked down, quietly overwhelmed. Shaq smiled. Effective today, you're our new head of maintenance. The room erupted. Not with cheers, but with something better. Respect. People stood. Some clapped. Others just nodded, eyes wide. Beau rose slowly, nodded at Elle and Shaq, and whispered, "Didn't see that one coming." Shaq grinned. "That makes two of us." As the meeting ended, and dismissed employees were quietly escorted away, Elle remained in the corner, letting the moment breathe. She had taken down a system. Without shouting, without force, just truth. And for the first time since slipping into a gray uniform, she felt clean. This wasn't the end. It was the re-beginning. The cameras had shut off. The files were handed over. Names were removed from the system. But long after the headlines faded, and the hotel settled back into its curated rhythm, Elle sat quietly on her balcony, legs pulled up beneath her, journal open on her lap. She hadn't written since the firing day. Too much noise, too much adrenaline, too many eyes waiting to see what she'd do next. But this morning, as the city stirred beneath a soft haze and the wind carried no weight, she picked up her pen and began again. April 6th, Lucille Heights. What the cameras didn't catch. The story wasn't over, but the part that mattered most, the quiet part, never played out under spotlights. She flipped back through previous pages, skimming scrawled dates, floor numbers, and field notes. Some of the handwriting was rushed, smudged with cleaning chemicals, curved slightly from exhaustion, and then, toward the middle, there it was. The sock, pressed flat between two pages, folded into tissue, still stained, fraying at the hem. Just the size of her palm. No tag, no pair, just one tiny torn reminder of what this had really been about. That moment had never made it into the official report. No legal form included it. No staff meeting addressed it. But Elle remembered it more vividly than any confrontation, any file, any ledger. The girl had slipped the sock into her hand without a word. Her face thin, sunburned, maybe 17, hadn't even shifted expression. But the weight of that gesture was unmistakable. It wasn't just a plea. It was a test. Will you carry this when no one's watching? Elle hadn't known what to do with it then. She had tucked it into her pocket, unsure if she was being warned or invited into something deeper. But now, with everything behind her, she finally understood. The sock was trust. Silent, desperate, fragile trust. She turned the page. What happened next hadn't made it into the cameras either. After the firings, after the investigators arrived, and departments were gutted, a private outreach team, handpicked by Shaq and funded directly from the family's foundation, returned to the sub-basement. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't bring lights or ask questions loudly. They came with translators, counselors, and protection. And they found the girl. Her name was Yara. She had been trafficked through 2 cities. Lured with promises of work. Then hidden in plain sight within a luxury hotel known for wellness and integrity. She hadn't run because there was nowhere to run to. No name, no documents, no known contacts. But she had eyes. She saw Elle. Not just as a cleaner, but as someone truly trying to listen. And that had been enough. Yara was rescued that night, quietly, no headlines, no press release, no reward. She was taken to a shelter that didn't appear on Google Maps, given clothes, a safe room, legal help. Elle didn't see her again. Not yet, but she got a letter, folded into a plain envelope with no return address. It arrived through the Lucille Heights front desk, passed up through 3 levels of management, until it landed on her suite's kitchen counter. The letter was handwritten in careful, uncertain English. I saw you before you saw me. I saw how you carried the trash like it mattered, how you folded the blankets even when no one asked. I saw you ask the older woman if she was okay. I saw you take your time, not because you were slow, but because you were paying attention. The sock was my sister's. I couldn't keep it anymore. But I knew you would. Thank you for not throwing it away. I'm safe now. I am learning my name again. Thank you. There was no signature, no way to write back. Elle hadn't shown the letter to her father. Not yet. Some things were meant to live outside the legacy. Quietly. She reached for her coffee and sipped. The city below buzzed with its usual rhythm. Sirens, honks, laughter, footsteps, the occasional helicopter blade. But inside she felt a stillness she hadn't known she needed. She turned the page again and wrote, Empathy isn't just soft, it's strong. It doesn't sit in front of microphones or dress itself in power suits. It waits in linen closets. It watches from mop buckets. It whispers in storage rooms. And it doesn't always need credit, just courage. Then, beneath that, the hotel is healing. The cracks were never in the walls. They were in the people. And now we're filling them, not with gold, but with grace. There was closure now. Not because everything was fixed, but because the silence had been broken. Hugh was leading a maintenance team now. He had a new badge, a new office, and a standing order from Shaq that no suggestion he made was to be ignored, even if it involved repainting the staff hallways in Lakers purple. Maria had been promoted to floor supervisor, not because of her years, but because of her consistency, her presence, and the way other women trusted her enough to follow. Marcus had stepped out of the records basement for the first time in years. He now helped lead the new compliance and ethics team.
And Elle.
Elle was no longer shadowing the executive team. She was the executive team. Shaq had officially stepped back, not to retire but to mentor. He told her during a quiet dinner that he was proud, not because she'd found the problem, but because she'd faced it. You didn't yell. You didn't threaten, he said, smiling over a plate of grilled salmon. You just kept showing up, over and over, like truth didn't need applause. And he was right, because truth, like empathy, doesn't always need to be loud to land hard. Elle closed the journal gently and stood, stretching as the sun finally broke through the clouds. Its light hit the windows of Lucille Heights and bounced back like a mirror. She walked back into her suite, dropped the sock gently into a glass keepsake box, and set it on the shelf beside her first framed leadership badge. Two sides of a journey, two truths, coexisting. One reminder, some stories don't need cameras. They just need someone willing to see. Then a close-up on the sock, framed, protected behind glass, resting in a case labeled, Trust Given, Trust Returned. That sock wasn't part of a business plan. It wasn't part of any renovation. That sock was the story beneath all the other stories, the one we didn't ask for but needed to hear. Now Shaq steps into frame. Just him. Sitting on a bench near the garden, suited in charcoal and navy, hands resting on his knees. Calm. He looks straight into the lens. When my daughter came to me with her plan, I thought she was trying to test the business. But she wasn't. She was testing the people. Not to see who was efficient, but who was ready. Flashbacks play. Tyron mocking a cleaner. Mason counting bills. Wesley gliding through corridors like a ghost in tailored clothing. But then a different rhythm. Maria helping another staffer tie their shoe. Bo listening without judgment. Marcus, silent in his records room, saving copies everyone else would have deleted. The ones Elle saw when no one else did. See, Elle wasn't undercover to clean floors. She was planting seeds, watching, listening, not to expose people, but to choose them. Because we weren't just looking for employees. We were building something bigger. The shot cuts to a large room. New, open, bright. Walls painted soft green. Skylights overhead. A banner hangs near the far wall. The Lucille Foundation, for workers without a voice. Inside, people move quietly but with purpose. There's no PR team, no press badge, just work, just healing. Shaq's voice returns. This is what came next. A foundation. For the ones who never had a fair shot. Undocumented workers. Survivors of workplace abuse. People who were invisible until someone decided to see them. Now a scene unfolds. Elle standing before a small group, handing out starter packets. Bo beside her, clipboard in hand. Maria with a headset, showing someone how to file a formal complaint. This time, one that would be answered. Shaq's voice slows now. I always thought I'd leave something behind that looked like me. A court, a shoe, a number on the wall. But this is better. Because this don't look like me. It looks like a. The scene shifts. Taryn stands at the steps of the foundation. Not in uniform. Not in heels. Plain clothes. She hesitates before walking in. Elle watches her quietly. Nods once. No fanfare. No I told you so. Just space. Inside, Taryn signs a form. A training program. Entry level. Probationary. But real. Shaq's voice continues. A few of them came back. Not all. But some. Not because we forgot what they did, but because we believed in what they could become. You don't heal people with punishment. You heal them with responsibility. With honest work, and a second chance that don't come easy. Cut to a testimonial wall. Short, typed quotes pinned like stars. I used to fear every paycheck. Now I help others get paid right. Marcus. Compliance team. They saw past my limp. Past my record. They saw me. Head of maintenance. I used to mop floors. Now I train those who will own them. Maria, staff development lead. Now Shaq walks down a hallway lined with portraits. Not of celebrities, but workers. Team leads, custodians, translators, immigrants, mothers, veterans. Names that once disappeared in back rooms, now carved in glass. He turns back to camera. This place ain't about marble. Or luxury. It's about memory. About how we treat the ones no one claps for. That's how the world changes. Not when you build something big, but when you care about the smallest person in the room. Fade into a scene of Elle standing in front of a new employee orientation. She holds up a badge with Lena on it, preserved in a frame. Then she replaces it in a glass case beside the sock. Voiceover continues. I used to think power was about titles. Turns out, power's about choice. You choose who you see. You choose what you let slide. You choose when to speak up.
And the world don't need more CEOs.
It needs more people who notice. Some stories entertain, others reveal. If this one made you pause, made you feel something, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. Because this isn't just a script, it's a movement disguised as fiction. Stay close. The next story doesn't just unfold, it uncovers. And trust us, you won't want to just watch. You'll want to witness.